Nice.
A good one.
It does weird things with the background though, so.
Yeah, both your traveler box set and your hat, your background was like occasionally blipping onto it. So I was trying to be like, what is that?
Are we live now, James?
I believe we are live.
Excellent. Right. Well, is everybody sitting comfortably?
Indeed.
Shall we begin?
Let's.
Yay. So, good evening, everyone. Although I realise it's only early evening over there in Pacific Seattle time. It's now midnight here in the UK. So if I do start to fall asleep or start talking total gibberish, I apologise now. I may turn into a gremlin later. That all depends on whether I run out of tea or not by the end of this. So, welcome to Gaming in a Time of COVID. And what we're hoping to do this evening is give you some hints and tips on how to get the most out of gaming in, let's face it, what's been a very unusual year for everyone. I am very, very fortunate to be joined by three wonderful people who I have known for varying lengths of time, but they're all fabulous designers, artists, gamers with huge amounts of experience, which I'm hoping we're going to be able to share with you this evening. So I'm going to get them to do their introductions because they're way more interesting than I am. I am Lynne Hardy. I am the Associate Editor for Call of Cthulhu at Chaosium and also the line editor for the upcoming Rivers of London game. And I will now shut up and I will go around my screen. And Graeme, can you introduce yourself, please?
My name is Graeme Barber. I am the managing director and writer of POC Gamer, a critical analysis blog for role-playing games and media and all that sort of good stuff. I'm now doing writing and consulting and all that sort of thing as well, which has sort of broadened my horizons. And I have been playing RPGs now since 1993, something like that, and have not looked back since. It has been nothing but a fantastic ride the entire time.
Thank you. Shel.
Hi, I'm Shel Khan. I had got into gaming late in my mid-20s, but I had the privilege of being in some playtest groups. And since then, I've been able to play a wide variety of weird games, not that much D&D, but a wonderful selection of games that led to me doing some professional GMing with the museum here in Toronto, writing for some various sort of scenarios and games, and for comic magazines that got into games. And now my main role is I'm a board member at DMG, which is a not-for-profit game arts organization. We work to create space for marginalized creators to make, play, and critique games. And our umbrella includes video games, tabletop games, anything. We're not going to try and get into the definition of games, but it's a wonderful organization that I've had the privilege of largely introducing tabletop games to. And so we've been doing GMing workshops, running games ourselves, and enabling our members to run games.
Superb, thank you. Amanda?
Hi, everybody. My name is Amanda Hammond, and I'm a senior designer on Dungeons & Dragons over at Wizards of the Coast, which is a post that I have only had since early December. So I'm pretty new to it, and I'm excited to be working on 5th edition. But before that, I also worked on 5th edition as editorial director for Kobold Press. And then before that, I worked at Paizo as the manager on the Starfinder product line for a couple of years, and Pathfinder 1st edition, a little bit of 2nd edition before that. So I've been involved on the professional side of gaming for about a decade, between freelance and various jobs, and I've been gaming myself for almost 20 years. I was just doing the math. And I realized it has hit a little over 20 years at this point. So I started with 3.5 D&D, and I got into World of Darkness and a lot of the D10 games, and I really just branched out from there, and was lucky enough to have that be my career. So I'm very happy to be here, and thank you for inviting me, Lynn.
Thank you for joining us. Yeah, if we're going to do that, okay, I started gaming in 1989 because I'm old, which is why I've got these young whippersnappers here with me. I started with RuneQuest. and then Call of Cthulhu. I started with GMing with Redbox D&D because I was given it by my gaming group because they wanted to play it. Then went on to Talislanta, which was how I got into gaming, by writing cheeky letters to Wizards of the Coast. Just after they took over the ownership of Talislanta, I got to know Robin by arguing with him over what he was going to do with Talislanta for Wizards of the Coast. And the rest is history. In and out professionally of the gaming industry for, oh gosh, I don't even know when I have to think about it. But I've been freelance full-time now for about 9 years doing this, and of course took up the post full-time at Chaosium. Oh gosh, nearly 2 years ago now. So time flies when you're having fun and making lots of games. So the way we're going to try and do this tonight is we're going to talk about a few topics, and then at the end we'll take questions. So if you do have any questions, please type them in the window. The lovely James is going to be keeping an eye on things, but we're going to try and tackle them at the end, so we don't get too derailed, because I know what we're like. That could happen.
We are a squirrely lot and we must be watched. So James, please
Yeah.
keep us on topic.
Yes.
So a couple of different topic areas. We'll try and get through them. And like you said, if you do have any questions, please type them into the chat. So what I'm going to start with is kind of like a combined topic. Is, what is your personal experience of online gaming before the pandemic and lockdown and everything changed? And has that changed since COVID? Or is this still pretty much exactly what you were doing anyway? So we'll go around in the opposite direction this time. We'll start with Amanda and we'll work back around.
Oh gosh, this is a very applicable question to me. So before the pandemic, and I only know this because right when the pandemic hit, I got into my Roll20 account and I was setting up a number of things that I'll describe here shortly. And I saw that the account dated back to 2013. And that is because I played exactly one online game in my entire life that a friend of mine from Ohio, where I used to live, was running and wanted remote folks to be able to play. So he was the DM. I hadn't run anything myself. I had played and was probably barely competent in moving the tokens around and getting my character to do things on the screen, which, I really had to learn a lot because, like I mentioned, when the pandemic hit, I did shift all of my games online. I started up a campaign, which I had been meaning to do in person when my previous one ended, and I hadn't yet, so it was sort of the perfect time. And I was also able to get folks who are remote. I actually have a British person who's in my Saturday game, and we play 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., which is 7 p.m. 6 p.m.
6 to
p.m. to 10 p.m.
depending on whether it's summer. Yeah.
Exactly. Oh yeah, British summertime. Exactly. So yeah, I shifted all of my games online. I'm running a campaign that's been going for 10 months since the pandemic started in March. I jumped into a campaign that had been running for almost as long, except for I joined it a little after it started. And then I'm playing in another game that also started up specifically because nobody was in the office at the time, and it was mostly people who at the time worked together, and since folks have shifted. And then I was in a couple streamed games as well that became even bigger during the pandemic. So I had to learn very quickly not only how to play and run on camera. I also ran a stream. I'm forgetting. I ran a Starfinder official stream when I worked at Paizo. So I really had to just kind of like quickly pull everything together, learn how Roll20 worked, which was a platform that I've used. I know there's other wonderful platforms out there that folks use. But it was really a learning curve, and it was really the way that I got to game, but also that I got to share my games with folks online, and the way that I was able to run my own game, because that's a really fun storytelling experience for me. So there's a big adjustment, and I have a lot that I'm more than happy to talk about what it was like to make that adjustment, but that's the overview.
Okay, Shel?
So I'm at that stage in my life where about half of my friends have very recently had babies. So we had actually started shifting things online just to make stuff more accessible for new parents. Maybe about 6 months before the pandemic hit, we started sort of, building a Discord for our games and that sort of thing. But for the work I do at DMG, we were really focused on in-person stuff. How could we make a physical event feel welcoming? How could we set up a room to accommodate multiple games? And obviously, when we went into lockdown here in Toronto in March, we stopped all of that and switched everything to online. But DMG has a very strong accessibility mandate. And when we sort of reached out to our members and asked them what kind of events they wanted online, we learned pretty quickly that video chats and complicated new tools were not in most people's sort of interests, especially at the beginning of everything. So we've been experimenting a lot with really low impact online gaming. And so it's really changed the games that we're playing and the way that we're playing them and the people that are coming out to play them. So
That's
I'm
fabulous,
excited
because
to
that is
dig in.
something I do want to talk about in one of our later topic areas, is that accessibility angle. So that's going to be brilliant. Graeme?
Oh man. So before playing remotely was sort of, it was something that we did when we wanted to try new things out or try out new ideas. Or more sort of hang out, because a lot of us are really scattered geographically across BC now. So getting together would involve either multiple flights or dozens of hours collectively of driving, which isn't economical for playing for a game for a few hours. So we sort of played off and on, and there's a few games where we look forward to, so my friends would be coming up to visit family in the interior here, and we'd have like a special game when they were up, and it was really fun. But then COVID hit, and it's been drinking from the fire hose of wisdom is what it's been. Like the getting used to everything, learning new systems for communications. Like prior to COVID, I loathed Discord. I was like, this is the worst thing ever. It drives me crazy. And now I'm like, oh, well, now I know all about Discord, and it works great. Okay. Now I've learned about Hangouts. I've learned about all sorts of other things, and just sort of like all the options just keep opening up, which is fantastic. But yeah, it was very much the same as Shel was saying there. Like there's that initial resistance where sort of like, whoa, we don't have to learn all this new stuff. I'm sure this is going to blow over in the next month or so. We'll be back to normal. And then that did not happen. And so, yeah, here we are. So yeah, just learning a lot about different systems and how different. I think the biggest thing is how different systems work better for different styles of play.
Yes.
Has been the biggest thing that I've learned out of all this.
Yeah, and again, that's something I'd like to discuss further once we've kind of done this first bit. I mean, for me, the really weird thing was that for a long time, a lot of my gaming was mostly online. Interesting as well, Shel, that you were saying about your gaming group having babies. One of the reasons we stopped doing a lot of tabletop for a while was because the other half of our group had a child, and they just didn't have the time. And of course, this was many moons ago, back before you had access to all this amazing stuff. So we kind of went into LARPing and going off to youth hostels for the weekend and did a whole load of that. But then I was doing, as sort of like Google Plus and Hangouts was coming online, I was doing a lot of playtesting that way, because my playtesters were scattered all over the place, all across the world. So I was using, like you said, G Plus and Hangouts, which was, was pretty good. You could get it to do most things. Obviously, Hangouts kind of doesn't really exist anymore. It's Meets, which has its own special issues, which we'll probably get into later. But I didn't really start doing, I was mostly live face-to-face was conventions for me, running convention games or running things in our friendly local board game cafe, Meeple Perk, or for Travelling Man in Newcastle. And obviously that all had to stop. So I started doing more, using more varied platforms. So although I've been doing a lot of online gaming, it had only very much been through Hangouts. And I've had to, as you say, learn different platforms for different things. I mean, to be honest, we ended up doing a huge amount more gaming. We've been a bit more experimental with our gaming, because, as you say, different platforms work better for different styles of play in different games. And it's also kind of given a lot of us an excuse to just go, do you know what? We've always fancied playing this. We've just never got round to it. Should we do that? And that's been really good because it's, I've had chance to run games I've wanted to do for ages and haven't done. Friend of ours has just gone completely over the top and is running all sorts of homebrew games with loads of different groups because he's dead excited about it all. So yeah, it's been fascinating trying to learn new platforms. But I was trying not to laugh when Amanda was going on about her Roll20 account, because when I went on I was running Golden Sky Stories on it. Yeah, mine was something similar. I'd set up the account for EtherCon years and years ago, about 8-9 years ago. And I never actually got to run the game because I got bronchitis and lost my voice. So it had just sat there for years and never been touched. And it was like, oh gosh, yes, now I have to relearn how to do this. So that's kind of our group experience of it, which is kind of like from nothing to 100 miles an hour in weeks flat to kind of mostly doing that, but now have to learn how to do it better. So obviously a lot of people are having to do this now. So what I'd like to talk about now is some like the best practices and the tools that are available and, ensuring that accessibility. So how about let's have a chat about the tools first so that people know what's out there, because there may well be things out there that people aren't aware of that could be better for them gaming. And this is the thing, as Graeme said, it's finding the right platform to support the type of gaming that you want. And don't be afraid that if the first thing that you try doesn't work for you, keep trying, because there hopefully will be something out there that will help. So I'm going to go back around the other way again. So Graeme, you're up.
Okay. So many tools. So a lot of stuff switches over to not a lot, almost everything switched over to online, just because communicating things out I found was really challenging, because we couldn't just get together, have a pint and talk about what we were going to do. Now we have to find different ways to disseminate information out to everybody. And then there was just, as I said, like different things, different tools for different jobs. So the main things I found was Roll20, Hangouts, and Discord were our big three for actually doing stuff. Roll20 is important if maps are important, because it has that great mapping function built into it, so you can like pre-make all your maps. And I just have a ludicrous amount of like 8 and 16-bit sort of little pixel images I use for making the maps that I have a lot of fun with. That's sorry, this segued. Anyways, so yeah, we found that was, if that was important to you, that was the place to go to. If just seeing each other's faces were important, like in the game, like everything's happening in the theater of the mind, Hangouts was fantastic, because you don't have that limitation of time you run into on Zoom if you don't have a pro account. And it's a pretty well established technology, and a lot of people are already in the Google ecosystem, which helps facilitate all that stuff. So that was pretty handy. And then Discord. Discord was great if it's theater of the mind and voices was the only real important part, just because it can be on your phone. It's pretty lightweight, doesn't use a lot of data or anything else like that up. You can have little side conversations going while you're talking, or it was really handy and really fun. And I enjoyed it. And the other things I found were things like Incarnate for making maps to like send to people, like, hey, this is where you guys are going to venture and good luck. And like, this map looks terrible. I'm like, well, that's the map you have. I've got a much nicer one. Don't worry about it. And stuff like Obsidian Portal, where you can make like a wiki site for your world or whatever you're doing. That was super handy, because they could go into it and read about things or find stuff out, and it just saved time and effort when the actual game started. Because I found gaming online is a lot of the social aspects fall by the wayside. Like the hangout part is still there, but you're also realize like, okay, like we only have 3 hours. We're already on a crunch because of technology. It's limitations. We have to get going. So yeah.
Yeah.
And for dice, we just rolled dice. We could never decide on a dice roller that we liked. So after we got out of Roll20, it was just roll and trust that they're rolling all those natural 20s. It's totally legit.
Shel?
Seconding all of those tools, I've really enjoyed using Roll20 as a place to build a library of games for myself to run with my friends. So even things that don't necessarily need it, if I want to support the creators, it's a great place to go and drop $10 on a game that I'm excited about. And then I get this really pretty interface that they've set up. And like I've been playing For the Queen on there fairly regularly with different friends, and you get the decks of cards and you lay them out all pretty on the background. But I have found that asking people who've never used it before to learn it can be a huge hurdle. So being prepared as someone, whether you're GMing or just sort of facilitating, to like do the bulk of the moving things around, I found to be important to making that not stressful for especially people who are trying RPGs for the first time. But yeah, it looks so good. And Discord has been 99% of my social life. So it's been really natural to move gaming in there as well. And I think, yeah, the idea that like you can have different chats going as you're gaming, you can have private chats with the GM as you're gaming. And one of the things that we've been doing, and we stole this from Ryutama, and I just use it in any sort of campaign now, is we keep a journal, like an in-world character journal that somebody's typing up as the game is happening in a dedicated Discord channel, which has been really great for when suddenly we can't game for a month and we can come back and read the journal. But it's also delightful as a GM to kind of see your character's internal thoughts appear as you're running the game. Other tools that I've been using personally in my own gaming are collaborative drawing boards online. So places where you can essentially use MS Paint together collaboratively. So you can upload a map image and then people can label things or draw on them or move their character around on their own level, or layer, has been really good. The one that I use most often that seems to work okay on tablets, which is better than most of them, is aggie.io. aggie.io, and it's a pretty straightforward, light tool, but it's been great for drawing, messy pixel art map, but a map that has worked great for keeping everybody on the same page and allowing us to sort of point at things. And I can upload fancier things, and then we draw horrible stuff on top of it poorly with our mouse, and it's great. For DMG, like I said, we've learned that a lot of our players don't want a huge overhead on an event. They want to come in and try something that they don't have to prepare too much for or think about or worry about. And they're not necessarily comfortable or have the internet access to the technology access always to have video chat going. So we've been really enjoying exploring gaming experiences that are lighter and simpler. And that's why For the Queen has been one of the things I've been doing, because once you own the card deck, if you really need to, you can facilitate it fully over voice, just reading questions aloud. We've had a lot of luck sort of setting up Discords for particular games and then just wiping them afterwards. And we've even, like, one of our absolute favorites has been finding games that exist and are designed for playing in something like Discord or over video chat, stuff that like is intentionally interacting with that stuff. So those have been dictating sort of what tools we're using. Things that we're excited to try in future, especially me personally, and I don't speak for DMG as a whole. I'm just telling you what we've been up to and then what I'm doing, just to be really clear. It's a big, big community. But what I'm really excited about playing around with next is Gather.town, which is a pixel art, sort of looks like a Nintendo NES era RPG that you walk around, and it has proximity audio. So you have a little personal self, and as you get close to people, you can talk to them or interact with stuff that's there. Like you can put videos that create ambient sound or that sort of thing. And so that's my next thing that I'm going to play with. And
I
ambient
know.
sound is the other tool that I love.
Richard, my husband, does a lot of LARPing, and they were using I don't know which one it was, I can't remember the name, but when they were doing LARPs, they had something set up so that it was like a proximity thing, and you could only hear the people that you were in that particular space with. So there were private LARP conversations going off in different locations. So yeah, no, I mean, it's fascinating that you can do that, which is really handy for things like LARPs, but that's a whole other area. We're not going to worry about that particularly.
There's always, every time I go looking for a new tool, there's 10. So it's exciting that way for sure.
It is, yeah. But it is a big ask for people to try and get their heads around all of these things. Amanda, what sort of tools have you been using and are you excited about?
Oh gosh. So for folks who, I'll start with a recommendation that will come with a caveat, but very early. So if you're running a game, if you want to run a game and you're, doing like us and just diving into to Roll20, I really recommend pre-made adventures that are on whatever platform of your choice. Most adventures that are out on one platform are out for all of them. So if you see something on Roll20 or you hear about something that's on Roll20, it's very likely it's also on Fantasy Grounds. It's also on Forge or one of the other bigger VTTs. And the reason that I recommend that is because those usually come with all of the maps, all of the tokens, all the stat blocks, all of the things that are preloaded that you as the GM would need to do as part of your prep. That is in addition to your actual normal prep, like reading stat blocks and looking up abilities to make sure that you know what's in the adventure. That can just take hours and hours and hours. So lots of companies have a lot of cool things out there. You might be surprised if you haven't checked out the various marketplaces, what is available. There's just a lot of really cool adventures that you might come across something and say, oh, I've always wanted to run this, and it's there. So that will save you so much time. That said, the caveat is I am not currently using any of that stuff, and neither are any of the games that I'm currently in. I am making my life extremely difficult, as I am wont to do. So yeah, the games I'm playing in are either games that are people's homebrews. Like my game is largely a homebrew. I'm playing in another friend's homebrew that is kind of like a play test, but it is entirely just something he's come up with. And then another game I'm playing in is something that was published, but I think it was published in like 2012 or something. There's not necessarily a giant back catalog of games in a lot of these platforms. So when you run something like that, just be prepared that you will have to import all those maps, and you might have to make some decisions, especially if it's a sandbox, about like, are there things that it's just not worth me taking the time to load into the system? I have known folks to like look at a section and go, oh my gosh, it's gonna take me 16 hours or several days of work time to get all this loaded in. So it can be very, very easy to bite off a lot more than you can chew in these type of platforms. And so that would be my biggest warning. Don't be like me and make your life miserable unless you really are really into your homebrew or something like that. It's definitely worth it, but it is a lot of work. So just a forewarning there. And as far as specific tools, most of my games, and a lot of this is overlapping friends groups, so it's folks who just prefer the same things, but my games primarily will do Discord. We'll have a server for a specific game, and that really kind of serves as like the email chain or the text thread, or I've been in a Twitter group message before that's been a gaming group. It allows people to really communicate, and then they can get into the voice channel when it's game time and we can all talk. And so I typically will do that. And then on Roll20, which is what we use, folks will use the video feature of that, so that when you've got the game up on your primary screen, you can see people's faces, and then the audio is coming in through Discord. It tends to be a little bit more stable. That's just what we found. To use the two different platforms that way. It also, as Shel was saying very astutely, really opens up a lot of options for types of communication, like the digital types of communication that you can't experience in person. And it's really fun. And the way that manifests in most of my games is that I've got two screens. I've got the game and the map and the tokens and all the stuff I'm running. And on my other screen, I will have my Discord up, and people will be posting GIFs that are like commentaries on the things that are happening in the game. Or their inside jokes, or the things that would normally be like table talk. when you're typically playing an RPG, or things that they would be discussing in the Discord. And when I run that, I noticed that when I'm really focused on the game, when there's a combat, like the game I'm running has gotten up to 13th level, so there's a lot going on. There's a lot of times I'm, like just juggling a lot of things and I'm not paying attention to the chat. I'll go back to that chat and I'll realize, oh my gosh, there was this entire inside joke that they were like telling each other throughout this entire combat, and I didn't even notice because I was just running the stat blocks. So it's really fun, and it is really collaborative, and it's very 21st century in that way, and it can be really fun to experience that sort of thing. But yeah, one other thing I had wanted to mention, I have not done this, but I've heard of a lot of folks doing this. I've been playing a lot of board games on Tabletop Simulator during COVID, and they've been more traditional board games and mods. I've not played a D&D or a Pathfinder or a tactical game on that, but every time I'm in there, I see lots of servers of people playing tactical RPGs, tactical tabletop RPGs. And I could see that working really well, because Tabletop Simulator allows you to load in an image that would be a map. And you can actually physically pick up pieces, so you could have minis. Like if you are really into the battle mat, which is something Roll20, it's digital and doesn't simulate like picking up and moving those minis. If you want to do that, Tabletop Simulator might be a good option.
Oh, interesting, yeah, because I haven't played any virtual tabletop board game thing, so I've not actually looked into virtual, that particular platform. I mean, to be honest, a lot of our coordination has still been done through Facebook groups, because we're old. And that's how we've been coordinating it and using that as the central point. So for Golden Sky Stories, I was running it on Roll20, because I needed somewhere. The resolution system is usually, well, it's not so much the resolution system, but you need to be able to keep track of tokens in Golden Sky Stories, and you're handing out cards which are effectively the equivalent of Savage Worlds bennies and things like that. And so I needed something where I could visually have tokens moving. So of course we did that on Roll20. Thankfully, our friend Dave the Troll, he lives under a bridge. He's very well behaved on the internet, I hasten to add. He already sort of got up to speed, so he showed me how to do all of this. So that was, really eased the learning curve a lot after like an 8-year break of having tried to use the platform. And so it was really handy for that. And I did love the Fog of War screen, that I could just reveal pictures to people as and when they got to that, and it worked really well. We tended to use either Zoom or the Facebook video thing, rather than the one that was in Roll20, because we had stability issues. But just to have that thing there, just as that little visual thing for moving around, we didn't need video because we were moving tokens, so it wasn't essential. Just voice chat was great. I mean, obviously Discord really only fairly recently, although time at the moment is completely, so it may have been a lot longer ago than I think. Discord didn't originally have video.
It's true.
So it was there for, just theatre of the mind stuff. So that was quite handy to have as just a voice channel. Quite often, I mean, this evening, the game that I run, we ended up having to turn the video off because it was causing stability issues, and we just went back to that. I mean, suppose thankfully with things like Call of Cthulhu, it's not particularly map heavy or tactical map heavy. So, as long as you've got a way of getting handouts to people, you have basically quite a lot of range. Find the platform of your choice. Been using Zoom a lot, obviously, because we do have the company account for running playtests and games for streaming and what have you. So yeah, I mean, those are the ones I've mostly used, to be honest. Discord and I have a love-hate relationship. I just think it's behaving itself, and then it will come and bite me, as it did this evening, by locking my monitor off for a while for no apparent reason whatsoever. So but it has been really handy. And the lovely thing with Discord is that it has this community thing going. And it's lovely to see how physical spaces have created their Discord spaces so that they can try and maintain that community engagement aspect. So it's a good one for that kind of thing. And as you say, you can have multiple things going off in it at the same time, so you can have all your little private chats and what have you that you can't necessarily manage in other platforms. one of the other ones I was going to mention is our friend Callum at the Row Least podcast has been using virtual whiteboards. So he was using Miro because he had sort of like an asset management game that he was playtesting, and he needed that space to be able to shuffle things around. So he found that really handy. So, you know, there are other tools that are not necessarily designed for gaming, but you can make them do cool and fun things in gaming. So, you know, don't just look straight for gaming platforms and things that are specifically for that. You know, there may be something else out there that is exactly what you need that isn't quite, it's more kind of like a business meeting thing, but you can subvert it and you can make it do what you need it to do for your gaming group. But, you know, keep your eyes open. You never know what you're going to find.
Lynn, you've reminded me that we also use an awful lot of Google Docs, spreadsheets, Draw, the slideshow. You can do a lot with those, with the collaborative tools built in there that can get very playful if you tell people how you want them to engage. So we've run Microscope in there. They're sort of like, yeah, they're whiteboardy draw sort of thing. And I threw a spreadsheet party for our holiday party, which was absurd and got well out of hand, but absolutely could work in depending on the game that you need and what you need from the game. So
yeah, and this is what we were saying before, is the fact that, you know, try the platforms that other people are using, but if they don't work for you, go try something else. You know, there's no point making yourself miserably unhappy staying on a platform that doesn't facilitate what you're trying to do with your games and your gaming group. And there are lots of forums out there that you'll be able to ask people for advice as well, you know, if you've got a particular thing in mind, because someone out there somewhere probably has tried it and may well be able to steer you in the right direction. So, you know, never be afraid to ask for help. Hopefully someone will, you know, there are some pretty good people in the gaming community. So, you know, we do try to be nice, don't we? Yeah, most of the time. In terms of best practice, then moving on from sort of tools, and things to avoid as well, we'll bundle those two together. You know, what real tips do you have for running a successful, fun, entertaining online game? I'm gonna let you go for free for all on this one.
Somebody has to fill the air.
Oh.
That's advice as well. Like legit. Go ahead,
People
Graeme.
have to get their turns.
Yeah.
One of the big challenges I found with online stuff is that the natural chaos of the gaming table does not translate well into a medium where you can step on each other and like over talk each other. And so I found that it's more important than previously, especially if you're running a game, to make sure that everybody's getting their turn, like whether it's you're going by initiative or just like rotation or whatever. Each person has to get their little time in. Otherwise, it can very quickly become a one-person show where whoever's the loudest will just talk over everybody else, and everyone else just sort of sits in the background. So that was one big thing that I found was really important. And also making sure that everybody, you know, talking about that diary thing, maintaining a diary, make sure everyone's on the same page before the game starts. Especially if like a person's missed a session or two and they like jump back in. It is way harder now to bring them back up to speed than it was previously. So yeah, like having some notes about what happened last few games, key, absolutely key.
Yeah, that reminds me of a funny anecdote, because obviously we've been developing new rules for Rivers of London, and of course we'd done the whole, you know, what happens in a combat, who goes next, and then of course we had people play testing online virtually, and it was a case of, yeah, but you can't do that.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you can't say play passes to the left, because where is left? So, you know, you may need to think outside the box for keeping, you know, a sort of an order so that you do know that people have had the turn. So yeah, it's interesting in the fact that we're having to change this mindset from sitting around a table to sitting around this virtual table, which may well change its order if somebody's internet drops and they disappear off screen. So we've
Power
got,
outage is my favorite game interrupter. That's
Yeah.
oh.
well, if you will live in BC, Graeme.
Mhm.
So any other hints and tips? Anything else that that would get help people get the most out of their games?
I'm gonna reiterate that if you, even if it's a game that doesn't have a GM, having someone in a facilitation role who can take charge of the flow of the game, and especially when there is sort of a pause where people are wondering what's supposed to happen next, I think those get a lot more, they happen more digitally, and remotely they go longer. And they feel maybe a little bit more stressful, possibly because just keeping the air in the game is more work when you're doing it remotely. So having somebody who's prepared to take on that role, even if it isn't a game that otherwise needs it, I think is important. So if it's just a host role or something like that, I think that can be really, really, really helpful.
I mean, I think building on what Shel was saying is that whoever is in that facilitation role, whether it's a game master or whether there's just a person who has taken on that role themselves, or the group has agreed that this person should be doing that, I think that person needs to be even more attentive in an online environment to the individual players than you would maybe necessarily be in person. A good example of that is just player engagement, especially if you don't have video on. Some folks do and some folks don't. It's very easy, I feel like, for that engagement level to drop, and for you as the game master to not have those visual clues that you would in person, to notice that someone is just disengaged or uncomfortable or just not having a good time, just that something is happening that you would want to correct as a game master, but you just don't know that it's a problem. I know that like an example in one of my games is that I had a player who was very quiet and was getting more quiet, and then someone who normally at the end of the session, there's people joking around and they stick around and they just talk about, things that are going on and nerd stuff. And he just kind of dropped out of the channel immediately. And, if this was in person and someone kind of leaves, it's easy to tell, oh, they're trying to get to something, or, oh, no, they're upset. I should find out, if they're okay. Because I didn't know, I was like, you know what, better to be safe than sorry. I reached out to that player, and it turns out that that player was just not really happy with their character, and they had ideas for what they thought the character's story would be, and that hasn't really been compelling for them, and they actually ended up talking to me about some mechanical rebuild stuff for that character, and we talked through how they would have more fun with the character, and I worked that into the game, and now they're playing a mechanically different character, but he's so much more engaged and he's having so much fun. And he basically went from a character who was withdrawn and kind of gothy to a whimsical Fae princess character. And he's just having so much more fun. And it's like, you know what? I'm really glad I asked, because I feel like maybe he wouldn't have said something, and that may have led him to just not want to play anymore. And you don't want your friends to not be having a good time in the game. So definitely the attentiveness has really got to be there to keep the cohesion together.
Yeah, and it's coming back to that flexibility, isn't it? It's the making sure that everyone is happy, everyone is having fun. You say just being aware of the fact that you aren't getting those visual clues necessarily, because you are an awful lot of human communication is body. I'm waving my hands around because I always talk with my hands, and you can't see them because they're below the camera. And earlier today when I was doing the audio only track, I was miming things, and it's like, this is ridiculous, no one can see. So it's a whole lifetime of learnt experience that is no longer relevant because you're doing it through this little box. So you need to pay more attention. One of the things I would say as well is, don't try and have too many players in your group. Keep it small, because it's hard work doing it online. It is far harder than doing it around a table because of the levels of concentration. You really do have to maintain those. So shorter sessions, more breaks, and fewer people. I mean, I really wouldn't run with more than 4 people now, whereas I have ridiculously, okay, I've only had it once, but 13 people at a table once, which I will never do again. It's horrible.
People, Lynn.
Yeah,
I kind of didn't have a choice with that one. I kind of got foisted on me, but it's like never, ever again.
Yeah.
So normally at a convention I'd run with 6 people, but online 2 to 4 is lovely. 2 to 3 hours for the game, 3 at the absolute tops,
Yeah.
because it's pure concentration, and it's exhausting. And the other thing as well is because we're all in our own homes, those distractions for everyday life are still happening. And it's a lot harder for people to commit that extra time because you're not going somewhere separate. You're not taking yourself out of your personal situation, your home situation. And you kind of really do have to be sweet and kind to yourself and give yourself permission to have that gaming time. I mean, one of the things we've got really noticed, obviously, is most of my gaming is usually done at conventions. I didn't get to do virtually any of that other than OrcaCon last year, when the last time I saw a lot of you lovely people. And being away from home, being in that situation, it kind of gives you the permission to engage with the game and put your real life to one side, which people really struggle with the online gaming. And it's been a really rough year for people, and you are allowed a couple of hours a week to just, shut all that off and go do the thing that you love. Give yourself permission to do that. You're allowed to. Auntie Lynn says you can.
I wanted to riff on what Graeme and Amanda were saying about like really paying attention to the other players, making sure people are getting their turn, checking in with players, and just mentioned that if you were using safety tools beforehand, they are going to need to be translated and retaught, because if a safety tool in Discord is going to work differently than a safety tool in Roll20 is going to work differently than a safety tool over a text chat. And so it requires a lot more intentional engagement with those. And one of the things to remember is that your comfort level with the tool is not necessarily your player's comfort level with the tool. So it does require more careful conversations to make sure everybody's feeling like they have access to the tools and that they're comfortable engaging, comfortable enough so that they can let you know when there is a problem.
Yeah. Very good point.
Yeah.
And this is why session zeros are very handy as well. Really, really would recommend those, because we've all mentioned various elements of this, which is making sure that everybody knows what the campaign is, what the ground rules are, what the comfort levels and acceptability levels of certain elements are, getting that those tools in place to make sure that everybody feels safe and comfortable and happy with the way things are going, and just so that everybody knows what's expected. Because again, you've got this whole disconnect where you can have one person thinking that it's going to be this kind of game and somebody else is thinking it's going to be this kind of game, and it's a lot harder to rectify that once the game has started online. So yeah, always session zeros. I love session zeros just because you can get a lot of that discussion out of the way, so people know where things are going to be going further down the line.
Yeah, I'd go so far as to say that session 0 is more important right now than it is than it was prior to COVID, and when we were able to play face to face, because there is so much stuff that happens in it that you could sort of assume or guess at based on body language or like all those other little social cues when you're all got together, that you can't do as well anymore. So you really need to spell things out more, and you need to really like lay out lines better than you did before, where before it was sort of like, okay, this is the sort of thing we're going to do. It's like, now it's like, okay, this is our genre. This is, the vibe we want. This is, how lighthearted or how serious we want to have it, and get everybody tracking right away. And then, especially as a GM, you have to be faster to reinforce that, because in the online context, there's not that chance to like let a person know in person or physically like put a hand on the shoulder like, hey, it's all right, no, sorry, we didn't mean to go there. That's not there. So you really have to snap onto it fast, be like, hey, stop, that's a line, that's a problem. That this isn't the game we're playing. and sort of like bring things back into line. And some people might say it's kind of being the fun police, but you know, it's not really. Like, you're keeping things on track and making sure that everybody's getting the maximum enjoyment out of things instead of just letting stuff run or slide or yeah.
Yeah, one thing that I think is worth pointing out in a digital online environment, when something does hit a snag, or honestly, just gaming, like Lynn said, requires lots of attention and focus. It's a lot easier to call for a break, I think, when you're running digitally. I'll have usually a couple, at least one, longer, like a 5-minute or a 10-minute break. Sometimes it's because the party has done a thing and I need to shift around. That happens as well, but it's pretty easy to just say, hey, let's just take a break, go get a cup of tea, take your dog for a walk. I have one player who often needs to take his dog for a walk once or twice during the game, and that's a lot easier because they can sort of like step away, literally physically step away from the game. Sometimes I've gotten messages during those breaks from players about like, oh, I had this idea, or wow, that I wasn't expecting that was really intense. So it's a really good sort of you can use it to your advantage to reflect and have the pacing be a little bit more in your control as the game master, and just realize just because you're all sitting in front of the computer doesn't mean you're not empowered to say, hey, let's take a break.
Yeah, and let's face it, a lot of us are working in front of the computer all day, so the ability to actually make people get up and walk away from the thing is really important.
Yes.
So one of the advantages, one of my friends actually still smokes, and I feel bad admitting it, but I will use that to my advantage. I'll be like, hey, everyone, let's take a smoke break now and just take 5. And my buddy's like, oh, thanks. I'm like, yes, this is for you, not because I'm panicking as a GM.
It also helps when folks have like small kids that are around, because you're on mics and you can maybe hear if somebody's child is not having a good time. So especially, I've got one player, if I hear a little shriek and then a mute, I'm like, why don't we take a break? Because I think Andrew might need a few minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we've been having a wonderful chat here, but I notice it's now 1:25 in my morning. So shall we? Has anybody got anything that they really desperately want to say, or should we throw it open to a few questions from the floor?
I desperately want to tell people, you don't have to use your video. You don't even have to use voice. There's so many great ways to game through text, through GIFs, whatever it is. If you are, you don't have a great internet connection, your laptop webcam is busted, like that doesn't mean you can't be playing games with friends online. Feel free to experiment, do your research. You're going to find a lot of really cool games that are set up to play by post or through text chat or whatever tools are available to you.
Yeah, back in the old days, there used to be this thing called play by mail where you wrote letters to each other. Why not do that on email? Because the postal system's shot to pieces at the moment anyway, that. So yes, you could, we've seen people run them on Twitter.
Yep.
As Shel said, it's a fantastic point that it doesn't have to be voice chat, it doesn't have to be video chat. There are text-based formats that you can go proper old school back to text adventures.
It's true. Yeah.
So I'm going to call on James now. James, do we have any questions? Hopefully something will happen in the chat window.
I think we see Denise. They are interested in this mug, which is the largest mug I've ever owned, and just also happens to have a big 5th edition ampersand on it. But it's great. I fit everything in it.
Is that you, Donna, asking about the mugs?
Donna, why don't you hit me up? And these actually come from Wizards of the Coast, so we'll do a field trip sometime when the world isn't exploding.
Do we have any other questions, or have we stunned you all into silence?
I'm looking at. There's a lot of comments of people who've really been enjoying the panel.
Oh, that's lovely. I'm glad you're enjoying it, everyone. And hopefully it's been useful.
There's also the comment from Donna saying that they're really interested in hearing about not needing voice or video. And one point that I thought was worth bringing up, this happened in one of my other games during the pandemic. From a technology accessibility standpoint, there was somebody who had a problem with their internet, and they didn't have internet for a while, and they actually played via Discord on their phone through their phone service. So because there are so many different ways to access the different platforms that are web-based, that's also a good point if you've got a player who's like, well, I don't know if my internet's great, and it's like, well, if it's voice only and it's Discord, there's an app for that. You could try playing it on your phone.
Now, that's a really good question that's just come in from D Yellow Flower. Now, this may be a weird question, but how do people organize their workspace desktops when DMing? Even as a player, I get overwhelmed with my playbook and character sheet and Roll20 and Discord and keeping track of everything. Yeah, I mean, I do not have a gigantic desk. Thankfully, I have a now tiny keyboard, which I can shove out of the way onto my book stand so I can have my dice and my notes, because I roll physical dice as well, because I love physical dice. But it is kind of like on my tiny physical desktop, it's actually quite tricky. And juggling windows can be quite tricky. So does anybody have any tips about how you set things up, how you juggle your windows? And Amanda's posh there, she's got 2 screens.
I was about to say 2 screens. It is key to life at this point. I can operate on one screen, but 2 is really helpful. If you can find one, even like just like a really basic secondhand VGA one, even an old CRT, just something to have that extra monitor. It's super handy. If not that, I've actually been using, because I'm on Windows 10 now and learning that, the function where you can arrange your windows or arrange your windows on the screen.
Heck yes.
Has been really, really important. So like, for example, for this right now, I have my one screen that I'm interacting with mainly is actually divided between 2 windows. One is the actual Zoom meeting that I'm in. And I can see everybody's faces and the comments there. And then right beside that, taking up an equal amount of screen, is a Firefox window with the full like I'm watching us with seconds of lag and watching all the screens and everything else comes up. But that sort of thing is handy, and especially like if you're playing something like Roll20 or something like that, you can break it down further and have it like split between 4 or have a 3-way split or something like that. It makes that space more manageable. And if you're talking about actual physical desk space, I got nothing. My desk looks like somebody fired a shotgun full of clutter at it, and it is just a mess. Like I literally use my bookshelf beside me more for rolling dice and stuff like that than I do my actual desktop surface, because I will see where the dice land over there.
That's why I now have a dice tray, because if I didn't, they'd just be off. They'd be gone. I would never see them again. It's a very hard desk, and things go quite a long way if I try rolling anything, and not a lot of space. I forgot to mention, I have my beloved iPad, which all of my games are on. So if I need to check rules, I do it on that.
Yeah, I really recommend that. In fact, Lynn, so you mentioned I do have 2 screens. I very deliberately arrange my virtual digital jamming situation so that my primary screen, which is usually my MacBook, is my virtual tabletop, and that just stays put and doesn't move, because that's what I'm using to move everything about in. But my my other screen, which is to my left, part of it's because I'm left-handed, so you might want to switch. But my other screen is where I have what you would consider your typical prep materials. So I've got usually like a PFSRD if I'm running Pathfinder, or whatever rules elements I need are up in different tabs, and I will preload those before the game when I know what encounters the players will be having. So I know, like, I want to have a real quick reference to like the swallow whole rules, for example, something that came up last session. I can just click on the tab that has already got that open, and I don't have to like go, oh, hang on 1 second while I look up a thing. It's very smooth, and it looks like I have my stuff together, even though so I do that. And then I also will, like, sometimes I'll run out of physical books. Like I'll run like a stat block that's out of a physical book or something. So I've got my 2 screens, and then I'll have my books sort of in the open space on my desk, and then I'll have like a pad and a piece of paper to take like physical notes. It's easier for me to write down, usually like combat modifiers, you know, because I'm running a lot of D20 stuff. Like, oh, this spell has knocked down this monster's AC by a certain amount, or this buff is up or something like that. So there's this very complicated, like beautiful mind array of stuff, but having it set up in advance of the session, you know, is really been useful for me personally.
Now you're a very spatially and visually aware person, Shel, so I'm expecting amazing things from you.
Oh no. Because 2/3 of my life is illustration, I have 2 screens as well, which I do recommend if that's an option, but obviously it's not for everybody. But the other thing that I have is an enormous collection of Post-it notes stuck to all of the screens.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. They're everywhere. So I actually don't know where to get a clean one is right now, but I really do keep Post-it notes here for just tracking, like I'm doing combat, or just notes for future me that I don't want the players to see, because anything outside of this window is off camera, right? So
yeah,
there's a lot of stuff you can do on paper, or like keeping notes tab in your own cell phone that you have that you're sort of tracking stuff in is totally doable, making use of whatever screen space is available to you. The other thing is, yeah, I try and run out of physical books as much as possible, just because for me, watching the map and watching the character sheet updates, like working if my players use a shared inventory that we keep track of, and that's enough for me on screen. I do get overwhelmed, and so having a physical book, it's a lot easier, just bookmark 12 things by shoving my fingers in the book and working that way than trying to find things in another app on my computer somewhere on the screen. But yeah, to second what Graeme said, like most operating systems now allow you to kind of pin windows to one side, and you can have many windows open. It's probably somewhere deep in the settings if it's not on yours right now, but it is really helpful for any kind of video chat plus other activity.
Yeah, now I have a big wide monitor, because I used to have it was a beautiful monitor, but it was teeny tiny, and I couldn't do that. You just couldn't read anything. But yeah, no, that be able to have multiple windows open next to each other is lovely. It's so luxuriant. So hopefully that answered your question, the yellow flower. The good comment back from them, so I'm assuming they're quite happy. Now the burning question before we finish is, Amanda, what's your cat called?
You all have been visited by Guinevere. This is Gwen right here. I'm a massive nerd, so her name is Guinevere from the Forgotten Realms books. She's 13 years old, and when I was in my late teens, early 20s, I decided if I ever had a female black cat, I would name her Guinevere. So, so that's
Nice.
her, and she's very friendly, and she has been joining us this entire time.
Yeah.
Again, that's the other cool thing about doing this sort of thing with videos. You get to see everybody's cool pets. Because cats like gaming. Cats love gaming.
My cat is so upset right now that she's not allowed in here, because last time she was in here and I was on a stream, she literally, like, you can't see, there's high bookshelves beside me, came hurtling down, like bounced off of me and took off, and then like came back up and like had her tail across my face. And so I was like, okay, no more. You've lost your room privileges for this.
I don't
But
think
yeah, she is upset.
I live in their house, so if Gwen wants to say hi, she's gonna say hi.
Yeah, this friend of mine's been running play tests for us, and basically her cat just loves dice, and you'll just hear this sort of like a few expletives as the cat decides to steal the dice and run off with them in the middle of a playtest session. So cats love gaming.
They do. There's that. Oh, sorry.
No, I was gonna say they're also chaotic evil, so they love disrupting.
This is true.
Well,
That's facts. There was one thing for that organization question that I was looking around trying to realize it. Clipboard.
Yes.
They are super handy. I put all of my quick notes, like all of the encounters, everything. It's all in a little clipboard, and I can just flip it open, check it out, close it, and it helps keep it all collapsed up. It doesn't feed into the post-it note apocalypse, which I'm so happy to see someone else is experiencing. And yeah, it's just also get to feel kind of official as a dungeon master or GM, where you're just like, hang on, and you open up your clipboard and like close it again, like, okay, yeah, that's gonna happen.
You see, I try to keep that all off screen. I have a book stand next to me that I have all my notes and things on that I tend to look. So this is why you'll quite often see me looking over here, is because I've got my notes and things, or I will be looking down because I have my trusty notepad with making various things on. So yeah, again, it's finding the tools that you're comfortable with and what works for you, because we can offer you suggestions, but you've got to find your own way of doing things, because each person has their own spatial requirements, their own ability and desire to engage with technology. And it may just be that some of your gamers just don't enjoy doing online gaming. I know various of my friends, they're not doing very much gaming anymore because they just don't get on with the interface. They just, they can't engage with it in the way that they want to engage with gaming, so they've kind of backed off a bit, which is really sad. And yet again, I know other people who are engaging more with gaming now because this actually works better for them. That ability to, let's face it, I did a panel at the Melbourne International Games Week in Australia. I would never have been able to go to that under normal circumstances. We've had people from all over the world coming to various different things. So for all the problems that COVID is still causing and all the terrible situation, it's, in some ways, it has really opened up gaming to a wider field and allowed participation on a level at certain conventions and things, at least, that people may not have been able to get to financially because of the travel and things like that. So there are occasional small tiny good things that have come out of this.
This is my first OrcaCon.
Yeah.
So.
And I haven't seen Shel in ages, so this is fantastic. I get to spend time with my friends.
This has been so much fun.
Yeah, for sure.
And we have time for one last question. Have we tried streaming with ambient noise, music, or soundboards to add to the story?
I have a hilarious story about this, but I'm going to let other folks talk.
Shel?
I love it, and I super recommend it. And you can get bots on Twitter that will like play a Spotify playlist or what have you right into your voice chat. But my favorite is mynoise.net that lets you kind of it is sort of a soundboard that lets you can choose some sort of themed sound, and then you get something like 10 different sliders to tweak. Is it the birds you're hearing in the forest, or the river, or that sinister rumbling? And that's just really fun as a GM. But you have to watch because it can flood the mic or be overstimulating for some people. So check with your players, but I love it.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I don't use it, because I have a real problem with background noise and differentiating voice if I've got a lot of background noise on. So I know that some people absolutely adore it, but it's not something I can deal with. I find it far too distracting. Graeme, Amanda?
I haven't been brave enough yet to experiment with ambient noise. I've done the Fog of War. I've done that in it, the light effects. But as far as music and stuff, I haven't gone there quite yet. That'll probably be this year's big experiment, just to see how all that works. Also, I don't have a playlist yet that I want to play for everything, so gotta work on that.
I mean, there are places and companies like Sirenscape that you can go to that have got sound packages that are quite often tailored to campaigns, in the same way that Roll20, Forge, and Fantasy Ground will have games and scenarios. So if you are interested in that, by all means, go and have a look. Amanda, come on. I think we've just about got time for the story.
So hopefully it'll be a quick story. TLDR, I don't use a ton of sound and soundboard and music in the games, just because talking and yeah, for the reasons that folks have covered. However, there is an advantage to doing it in a very limited way to emphasize something that has just happened from a roleplay perspective. And the way that this worked for me in my game that I'm running, I had a player who was playing a druid, and this was a character that he had built after his previous character had died, actually the mother of his previous character, and it was all worked into the campaign, and it was super cool. And so the players had seen her as an NPC throughout the town they were in, and then he started playing her after his character died. Well, she was a druid, and they didn't really know what her mechanical build was. They just thought she was an NPC. And so they saw that she had a staff strapped to her, and she was, going with them now on their mission to what they were doing, but they hadn't really seen her in combat. And I think everybody just assumed like, oh, maybe she's a spellcaster, but she doesn't have, a spell book on her, but I guess we'll figure it out. Well, in one of the first combats that she took part in was actually her coming into contact in an aggressive way with a group of like aggressive sort of overlord cyclops. And I knew this because the player had talked to me, and I actually thought he was going to do it in the previous session, but she was a druid who could turn wild shape into a T-Rex. And so I was waiting for this moment to happen, and they meet the Cyclops, and there's the leader of the Cyclops clan, who's all like, what are you doing on my island? Get out of here. We're going to kill you. We're so much more powerful than you. And his druid just holds herself upwards and starts to scream, and while she's screaming, she wild shapes into a T-Rex, and he played the T-Rex scream from Jurassic Park.
That's amazing. I love it.
I had no idea
Fabulous.
that everybody just went, oh! While she roars in, and then charges into combat against this huge size Cyclops. It was a size up Cyclops. So
Oh, that's fabulous.
Yeah, just sort of element of surprise, emphasis on role-playing elements for soundboard stuff can be pretty cool in a limited fashion.
Well, I know we've got a couple of minutes left, so I'm going to take the opportunity to thank everybody who's joined us this evening. Thank you all for, spending time listening to us waffling along. Hopefully we've been helpful. We've made some useful suggestions to you that will be able to, encourage you to give this a go if you haven't, and help improve your game if you are already doing it. I would like to take the opportunity to thank my fabulous panelists for coming along and sharing their wisdom with us. It's been lovely to see you all again and spend time with you. Obviously, normally I would be in Seattle with all of you now. I miss you all. Stay safe. Take care, everyone. And enjoy your gaming. Does anyone have any final words they would like to say very, very quickly before we cut?
Thank you, Lynn, for having me here, joining these excellent humans. This was wonderful, and I really appreciate it.
Lovely to have you, sweetheart.
It was a fantastic panel. It was amazing to be a part of. It's great seeing those we haven't seen for a while and meeting new people. Nice to meet you, Shel.
Yeah.
Hopefully you'll be able to come out to OrcaCon next year, and
Fingers
we can
crossed.
all have a pint and have a good time instead of drinking diet beverages and looking at each other through a screen.
Cold tea.
Noises.
Yeah. So thank you again, everyone. And like I said, stay safe, take care, and hopefully we'll see you all next year in person. Thanks.